Live from the Business RadioX studio inside Renaissance Bank, the bank that specializes in understanding you. It's time for North Fulton Business Radio.
And hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of North Fulton Business Radio. I'm John Ray, and folks, we are broadcasting from inside Renaissance Bank in beautiful Alpharetta. And folks, if you need a better experience for a better banking experience for your business, check out Renaissance. I think what you'll find is they are big enough to handle pretty much any need you can throw at them, but small enough to do it in a personal way. And that's really kind of a magic combination with banks, right? Go to renaissancebank.com, find their local office, and check in with them. I think you'll be glad you did. Renaissance Bank, understanding you, member FDIC. And now I want to welcome back, I guess, an old friend, Soumaya Khalifa. Soumaya is with Khalifa Consulting. Soumaya, welcome.
John, wonderful to be with you. How are you?
I'm great. We were just talking as we came in this morning. It's been since before the pandemic that we were together in person, so this is just a special delight.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful to see you in person and be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being here. So for those that don't know you and don't know Khalifa Consulting, how are you helping folks out there?
Well, Khalifa Consulting has been in business for almost 12 years, and we started out being there for leaders and for organizations to help them bridge gaps of understanding in the DEI world, in the intercultural world. And now we have a specific focus on religion in the workplace and how to leverage that to drive results and add to the bottom line.
Terrific. And you've got an extensive corporate background that you bring to your consulting work.
Absolutely. Many years in the corporate America world, in nonprofit management, in government training, you name it. And I bring my whole self, and my team brings their whole self to our clients.
That's terrific. You mentioned, I guess, the bringing religion into the discussion, into the dynamic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That might not be the word folks are expecting to hear when they hear about DEI, right?
Right.
Talk about why bringing religion is so important to DEI.
That's a great question, John. Thank you. First off, in the DEI world, we tell people bring your whole self to work, right? So diversity is given. Our country is becoming more and more diverse by the minute. We look so different than what we looked like 20, 30 years ago. Inclusion is an act. It's an act to bring people to the table. And equity, of course, is to treat people like they need to be treated. And so that it's like diversity is like being invited to a dance. The inclusion piece is like dancing in the dance party. And then being able to request songs that a person wants to dance to. Now, a new word in the DEI world is belonging. Is belonging. How do I, as an employer, make all my employees feel like they really matter, they're validated, and we care about them? There's a quote that was by an executive that was in The Guardian, and it says, "I get paid well to do something I enjoy, and I'm surrounded by clever, funny, like-minded people, and for 45 or 50 hours a week, I feel like I'm isolated." Oh, wow. Just think about that. If we have employees who feel that way, and a lot of us do feel that way, are we really capturing all their 100% or even more? Probably not. They're probably giving less than 100%, and that impacts the bottom line. So when we tell people, bring your whole self, and we tell them, oh, by the way, leave your religion at the door, that does not bring their whole professional self to our organizations. And there's been a lot of studies on belonging. And organizations that have leveraged belonging add to their bottom line. But organizations that are high belonging are linked to 56% increase in job performance. Just think about that, 56%. 50% drop in turnover and 75% reduction in sick days. And so if you take a 1,000-person company, this would result to an annual saving of $52 million.
Wow. That's unbelievable.
That is a business case for how do we transform our culture in organizations to that of belonging, where me, doesn't matter what do I look like, believe in, etc., feel like I really matter.
And that's what, when you use words like belonging, I think some business people maybe think that's a little woo-woo or what. It's a little ethereal, maybe is the word. It's hard to get your arms around what that means and the impact of that. So you talked about impact. Let's talk about how you engender belonging.
Effective leaders know how to do that. They know how to care about their employees genuinely. They know how to follow up with them, ask about them, praise them, give them constructive feedback. It's good leadership. It's nothing more and nothing less. It's welcoming the person as they are, acknowledging their differences and their commonalities, celebrating who they are. I know that's another woo word, but that it really matters. It does make a difference.
Yeah. And you talked about the numbers of the religiously, I guess, bringing the whole self to work, and that means bringing one's religion to work. You've got some thoughts about the trends of religiously affiliated and how that plays out, and maybe plays counter to folks' conception of where people are with religion.
Yeah, so the Pew Research did some fascinating studies, because our perception right now is that people are not affiliated with religion, and that's going down. Less people are going to churches, synagogues, and mosques. Mm-hmm. And according to the Pew Research that was published not too long ago, they looked at 2010 and projected to 2050 worldwide. Mm-hmm. And for 2010, they have 5.8 billion people who are affiliated with religion. And the projection for 2050 is 8.1 billion people. Mm. So that is an increase of 2.3 billion people becoming more affiliated with a religion, whatever religion that is. Mm-hmm. While they also did a study about the unaffiliated, and that went from 1.1 billion in 2010 to 1.2 billion in 2050. So that is only a 0.1 billion increase over that 40-year span versus a 2.3 billion increase in the affiliated religiously people. And, by talking about employees, it's not only employees. We need to be thinking about vendors, about customers, mm-hmm. because once an organization or a leader gets that down with their employees, because these are the people that they're in touch with all the time, then they will know how to do that with their clients and with their vendors, et cetera. So it's not just about employees. It's a much wider circle.
So the case here is that DEI is not just related to race or gender or some of the attributes that folks commonly think of when they think of DEI. Religion needs to be thrown into that mix.
Well, human beings are very complex, and we have so many different layers, and mm-hmm. DEI is supposed to look at all those layers. Mm-hmm. That makes sense, and religion is one of them.
Soumaya, what is the I guess what is the state of affairs as it relates to including religion and DEI? Because I would imagine that a lot of folks don't see it that way, right? I mean, they see it in a little more confined way than including religion. So what does it look like for most companies?
Sure. Well, there is an organization up in D.C. It's called the Religious Freedom and Business Forum, led by Brian Graham. And they work a lot on that topic, and they're the leaders in that conversation. And they really show throughout their research and work with different companies that it actually adds a lot to the bottom line. And it's not about religion per se, like, you need to know this and this and this, and it's not about converting people or anything, but it's what do I need to know about my fellow employees or my employees and customers to make it where I validate them, where I appreciate them, back to the belonging conversation. Mm-hmm. And they have a lot of organizations that they work with, including TI, Texas Instrument. Actually, they are a forerunner into that field where they have many employee resource groups, and some of them Jewish tradition, interfaith tradition, Muslim tradition. Google has a great platform for that as well. They bring that conversation into the workplace. Tyson Foods has a chaplain on site for all the employees. So religion is being talked about and is being considered. Accenture, for example, they hosted a nationwide webinar. It's called Religious Literacy 101. What does it mean to have an accommodation mindset? So more and more organizations, American Airlines is working on that as well. So there are a lot of leading organizations that bring that conversation in. And it's not, pushing one religion over another. It's having a platform where people get to know each other better. And religion is part of what makes one, or spirituality is what makes one taken away. That is part of people's DNA. And so when we talk about that, we validate and we appreciate and bring to the table.
And this is not just vertical in the sense that it's from employee to leader, let's say, or up the chain of command, shall we say. I hate that term, but I'll use it. But it's really horizontal as well, right?
Absolutely.
It's about coworkers and because they spend more time with each other than they do sometimes with their leader, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's actually more than just horizontal. It's 360 because it's not only employees, the vendors, clients, what would it be like if I went into an organization and they know, they treat me in a culturally competent way? Would I want to come back? Would I want to do business with them? And we're talking about here in the U.S., but what if organizations are doing work with other countries that have a predominantly different religion, and that makes up who they are, and not knowing about that religion would be a disadvantage.
Folks, we're here chatting with Soumaya Khalifa. Soumaya is with Khalifa Consulting, her own consulting firm. Soumaya, let's talk a little bit about maybe shift gears here a second. I want to come back to DEI in a second, but let's talk about just the pandemic and how some of these trends have been affected by the pandemic, either accelerated or diverted or whatever you see out there that the pandemic has affected.
Yeah, well, the pandemic is a mixed bag, right? People took them a while to be able to pivot and be online and do work and do business, and not only people, but also organizations. And organizations have to be very intentional about DEI and belonging, more intentional than before, because it is much, much easier for people to feel isolated if they are not connected. And being virtual was the perfect setting to feel isolated. So what do leaders and organizations do intentionally to bring that conversation online to their employees? Maybe setting up just chats, maybe coming into meetings early to check in on their employees, maybe acknowledging holidays, maybe acknowledging birthdays. So I feel very strongly that the pandemic and going virtual had to make all leaders more intentional about many things, including the DEI world.
I guess one thing about dealing with employees, the remote employees, maybe the way to ask the question is, I recently read an article about stay interviews, that how important they are. And what was interesting to me about the article was not the recommendation, but just how easy it is. This is not some formal process. This is really informal. And it amounts to, as much as anything, check-ins. It strikes me that what you're talking about is something similar.
Absolutely. That
it's not some formal major process or major events that people have internally, but that action of checking in with people in a knowledgeable way about what's going on in their lives, right?
It's being caring. It's being effective leaders. It's being effective coworkers. It's being caring coworkers. That's what the bottom line is.
Right.
Yeah, it's not rocket science.
Right. And maybe that gets to the question I had about smaller businesses out there that think, I don't have the funds for big internal events. We don't even have time to do what we're trying to do right now. But that really answers that question for a business like that, right?
Right. Well, taking time as leaders to speak to their employees. How are you doing? What's coming up in your, calendar?
Right.
Is there anything that I need to be aware of? For Muslims right now, if a person feels they are in a psychologically safe environment, they will tell their managers in their organizations, I have Ramadan that's coming up in April.
Right.
And they could talk about what does Ramadan mean to them. And that is, in businesses, in schools, and whatever you want to think about. But with the world's population being about 25% Muslim and about 7 billion Muslims in the U.S. alone, every and each single organization, whether small or large, will have a Muslim employee. They will be interacting with Muslim customers. And how do I make my organization friendly enough, welcoming enough, where for a Muslim or a Jew or a Christian to feel comfortable to work with me and engage me?
Let's talk about, since Ramadan is coming up, let's talk about that and use that as an example, right?
Yes.
So how should an employer, a leader that's not Muslim, how should they approach Ramadan with their Muslim employees or vendors, customers, what have you?
Thank you for that question. Ramadan is a month in the lunar calendar. It starts differently every year. It's 11 days earlier. My favorite story is when I was in corporate America, and my manager, her name was Vicky at the time, and I would go to her and say, hey, I'll need a day off either Tuesday or Wednesday for a holiday, and that is the Eid after Ramadan. And she would look at me really funny, say, okay, do whatever you need to do. And later, after I went into the consulting world and she attended one of my sessions, she says, all those years I thought you were very smart, and I couldn't figure out why you can't look at a calendar and tell me what day is your holiday. She was coming from a December 25th Christmas mindset.
Right.
But for Muslims, the days are not really set because they look at the moon and the cycle of the moon. So for leaders and for employers, it's just to be aware, to look at a calendar that has all the holidays and acknowledge those holidays. Maybe wish their Muslim employees a blessed month of Ramadan, knowing that they have fasting from dawn to sunset, no food, no drink. When they have a lunch meeting, the Muslim, if they're fasting, might not partake in that. So just being sensitive to those things, sensitive to their energy level during the daytime. If there's an important client meeting and if they have the option of scheduling in the morning versus later in the afternoon, that would be better. Just gaining that knowledge and saying, hey, I'm validating you and I care about you, and I want to wish you a very blessed month of Ramadan. The Muslim day starts out in Ramadan with a very early breakfast before 5 o'clock in the morning. And then they will abstain from food and drink and smoking, if those who do have that habit, all the way to sunset, which is this year will be around 8-ish. And so that is a very long day without food or drink. And then sunset time, they will break their fast with family and friends. And now hopefully that COVID is kind of winding down, or we know how to deal with it better. People will be gathering to have meals together. And then there is a special nightly prayer in addition to the 5 daily prayers, where Muslims will recite 1/30 of the Quran every night. And so their days are very long. And so knowing that, and knowing about, maybe during their lunchtime, they will take it and not eat lunch, but maybe take a quick nap, or do an alternative work schedule if they are at work, where they will work through the whole day and, get off work a little bit earlier to take a nap afterwards. So there are a lot of different accommodations, but work with the individual to see what works for them.
Sure. And just a reminder, here, it's about understanding both similarities and differences, right?
Right.
I mean, Easter moves every year too, so so this is not uncommon to the Christian world, right?
That's a great point.
Yeah, and the same way with Passover, it moves every year, so it's the same way in the Jewish tradition. So, but the understanding the differences and understanding why certain practices are what they are, and the significance of those practices is vital.
Absolutely. I can't agree more.
Yeah.
I can't agree more. And Ramadan is also a very spiritual time for Muslims. They reflect a lot. It's almost like like their savings account for the rest of the year, their spiritual savings account, and they try to do as many good deeds during their month because they believe that is a very holy month and their good deeds are multiplied by hundreds of times. So they will be giving more money out to the poor. They will be doing more prayers, and that might translate into, if they're working from their offices or from their workplace, they might need reasonable accommodations to perform their daily prayers. So that is something else too to think about for employers.
And just as with whether it's Christians, with Jews, or Muslims, there are different traditions within those faiths. So different. When you call someone a Christian, there are a lot of different, I guess, lanes that they may occupy, if you will, denominations, traditions, what have you. It's the same way with Muslims or those that are of the Jewish faith.
Absolutely. A lot of times folks have a mindset that a Muslim looks a certain way, dresses a certain way, walks a certain way, and they're all very religious. And I have news for everyone. Not all Muslims are very religious. We will find Muslims who do adhere to the teachings to the T, and some even a little bit more, but others who identify culturally as a Muslim. But one thing about Ramadan, even those who are not necessarily very religious, when Ramadan comes along, they tend to become religious. And the nuances between the different schools of thought within Islam's, all are supposed to fast in the month of Ramadan, but a difference would be, when do they stop eating and when do they eat? That would be a difference in interpretations.
And just understanding those differences, right, helps you identify with your employees and give them accommodations and create that sense of belonging.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what we're working towards, right?
Right.
Is making a better world for everyone. And we need to start within our own circles. And as leaders, as managers, as organizations, that is where we can make the most impact and impact people's lives.
So let's get back to, I guess, DEI in companies themselves. And we've been through a lot in the last few years as it relates to these efforts in corporate America and in business generally. There's a lot of, I guess, what I might call box checking, publicity seeking for certain initiatives that maybe you hear about in a press release, but then you don't hear much about anymore. And then there's moving the needle. There's really, I guess, making progress. I guess talk about what you see. Talk about how companies can self-assess where they are and whether they really are moving the needle.
Yeah, that is a question that we wrestle with all the time, right? Sure. Are we doing things just to check the box, as you say, or are we really changing the DNA of the culture of the organization? Are we holding ourselves accountable? Are we holding leaders accountable? What are the metrics that we are using to do that? And, if organizations treat DEI the same way that they treat safety, that would be my recommendation. Look where we were with safety a couple of decades ago, and look at, we have OSHA now, and we have all those things where safety is taken very seriously. Well, DEI affects the bottom line just as much as safety, if not more. Right. But if we don't take it seriously, if we don't hold ourselves accountable, then it turns out to be an exercise of checking the box, right? I've done training, check. I've done this, check. But are we holding people accountable for that? Are we impacting their pay if those goals are not met? That is where the rubber meets the road. And yes, unfortunately, there are organizations who do engage in DEI, but we need to meet them where they're at and work down that road to get them where they need to be or where they want to be. in the DEI spectrum.
How do I measure, if I'm a leader of a company or a team, how do I measure inclusion? How do I measure belonging? Because these are personal feelings that people have, right? And everyone is at a different place when it comes to feeling like whether they belong, let's say, at an organization. So I may have good intentions, but how do I measure where I am and get honest answers from my team?
Right. There are so many different ways to do that. You spoke about the state interview, right? So this is a quick and dirty way to get a feel of where people are at. There are surveys by third-party vendors who could design the surveys for you as an organization and be able to get that honest feedback. Are you really where, as an organization, where you want to be, or is there work? And let me tell you, those surveys, they're like a big aha moment for organizations because they think they're somewhere, and then the survey comes back and says, turnover rates, all those things are ways. Look at hiring numbers. What kind of people is the organization hiring, and what's the retention of all those people that they're hiring? If we are hiring, certain groups within our affirmative action plan, right? And, but they're not staying with our company. There's something not right there. So what can we do about it? So there are so many different metrics that, organizations can use.
So let's talk about and we were chatting a little bit about this before we came on, about the role of a white male heterosexual in the DEI world.
I was having a conversation with someone I met through LinkedIn, and he said, let's have a conversation. And so it was supposed to have been like a 10-minute conversation just to meet and say hello. It ended up being an hour conversation. And in that hour, he talked about he is a white heterosexual male, and he does not see himself in the DEI world. There's no place for him. And my reaction to him was, what are you talking about? DEI is for everyone. And if everyone is not included, then it goes back to checking the box. Right. But everybody has to be vested. They have to have skin in the game. They have to be included. Their voices needs to be heard. And white heterosexual males, they need to feel like they belong as well. And, it's no surprise with our changing demographics, the white heterosexual male feels threatened because they're no longer where they were, say, 10, 20 years ago. There are a lot of people who look differently than they do. And that conversation needs to be had because without them, DEI does not work.
Good words here from Soumaya Khalifa. She is with Khalifa Consulting. So, Soumaya, let's talk a little bit about maybe a success story, one that illustrates your work, the kind of consulting work that you do, and the transformation you help bring.
I love that question. Thank you so much. I'll share with you a very recent example. So there is this global organization that had their global conference, and they did not look at the calendar, and they scheduled the conference for the first week of Ramadan. And when we're talking about 25% of the world population is Muslim, you bet that there's going to be a large contingency of people coming to that global conference who are Muslim and are most likely practicing. So how do we incorporate that this is not an afterthought into the programming, into the reasonable accommodation? What do we do about meal times? How do we, provide people the opportunity who are coming from around the world, an opportunity to perform their nightly special Ramadan prayer? Muslims break their fast on dates. How do we get dates to them? All things like that. How do we set up the prayer rooms and wash stations, etc.? So working with them to incorporate what messaging do we need to send out? How do we wish people a happy Ramadan and let them know that we know and we appreciate and validate them? And so all those things were worked into their scheduling, and we are looking forward to a very successful conference for them.
Wow. That's terrific. And that's a one-time kind of thing, I guess. That's an engagement that you had that relates to that conference. But you work with companies when it comes to longer term,
absolutely,
kind of situations and engagement with their employees.
Absolutely, yeah. A major retailer in the U.S., I've been doing work for them for many years, training their managers and supervisors on how to manage their diverse workforce with special, emphasis on their Muslim employees, because in certain parts they have a large contingency of Muslim employees. So help them understand the layer of the religion, how does it impact the workplace, but also look at the complexity of their employees. So religion does not define them all, but they have different many layers that they need to be looking at. And so that conversation just keeps on evolving with their organization and with their managers and their leaders.
So let's talk about the types of companies that you work with. It sounds like you work with medium-sized to larger corporations.
Yes, we work with medium-sized to large corporations, but we also do executive coaching for smaller organizations.
Okay.
Not necessarily in the DEI world, but in leadership, and it's very gratifying to see how a manager grows and impacts their teams. And it's just a beautiful feeling to see them succeed. That's
terrific. So let's say someone's heard this interview, they call you up, and how does the conversation go? I mean, what's the discovery call look like with you when somebody inquires?
Wow. So it goes like wanting to know what their role is, what are their pain points, what are their thoughts about how they want to fix it. Because a lot of times leaders and organizations think that they could fix something a certain way, but after discovery that they really need something else, and find out what's their timeline and look at options for them, and then go back to them and identify what are some of the options and talk to them about it and see how to proceed, what works for them.
And I didn't hear the word shame or blame in there. So there's no shame in saying, I don't know. Right.
Absolutely.
And in fact, that takes courage that is applauded. Right. And that's really, I think it sounds like the first thing you do with your, the folks that call you up and engage you.
Absolutely. We meet people where there are. We meet organizations where there are no judgments. It's let's work together to move the needle, as you said earlier, and do that together collaboratively. I can't say the word, but anyways, You know what I mean.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
I hope the listeners do too.
Yeah.
But it's really a journey. It's a journey. It's not a one stop and we're done. It's a journey for organizations to get to where they need to go. And it's almost like a vision statement, right? We always work towards that, but we don't get there because it's so big. So there's always opportunity for growth for individuals in the executive coaching and for organizations in the DEI world.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. It is a journey from a lot of different perspectives. And what that means is if you've reached a certain point, you haven't arrived. There's always room for improvement.
Absolutely.
Right. I love it. Soumaya Khalifa, folks, with Khalifa Consulting. I could go keep going on, but we're going to have to let Soumaya get back to the great work she does. But before we let you go, Soumaya, why don't you give everyone your coordinates, how they can be in touch with you?
Sure. So our website is khalifa.consulting. That's KHALIFA.consulting. And phone number is 678-523-5080 or information at khalifa.consulting.
Soumaya Khalifa, folks, with Khalifa Consulting. Soumaya, this has been awesome as usual. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
Hey, folks, just a quick reminder. If you are in and around the Johns Creek area or the greater North Fulton area, and you're looking for a better solution for dinner than the drive-through, I've got it. It involves checking out ansculinaryconcepts.com. It's asculinaryconcepts.com. ANS Culinary Concepts is the name of the company. Now, they're an award-winning culinary studio. They do corporate catering. They do corporate team building, Big Green Egg boot camps, but they have Let Us Cook For You meals where you can order a gourmet meal that you can drive by, pick up, take home, and you will be a hero at home, I promise you. I've been a hero at home a few times myself when I've stopped by. So give them a call, 678-336-9196. Ask for Andrew Traub. He's my friend there who is the executive chef and owner of ANS Culinary. Chat with him or just go to the website and look at their latest menus, asculinaryconcepts.com. And folks, just a quick reminder as we wrap up, North Fulton Business Radio is on all the major podcast apps. You can find us there, and we would love it if you would share the show. If you've heard something here that you think would be valuable for a friend or colleague, something that Soumaya has said or any of our guests have said in other episodes, we would love it if you would share the show. It's not about me or Business RadioX. It's about our great guests, and we're here to celebrate them and the great work they do. So for my guest, Soumaya Khalifa, I'm John Ray. Join us next time here on North Fulton Business Radio.